In the dark shadows, in the white cold, fearlessly we search for knowledge new and old. We drink the strong spirits and read the ancient tomes. The order of the Abracast. We are the brave and the bold.
Part 1. The man who does not die. The great Illusionist, Rosicrucian and Freemason who termed himself the Count de Saint-Germain is without question the most baffling personality of modern history. His name was so nearly a synonym with mystery that the enigma of his true identity was an insolvable to his contemporaries as it had been to later investigators. No one questioned the Count's noble birth or illustrious estate. His whole personality bore the indelible stamp of gentle breeding.
Your body is your temple, so let's make sure you got a badass t-shirt on it. Variety of cool occult themed t-shirts. And other merch like stickers, wall art, mugs, and more. Visit the storefront on abracast.com. The Abracast, occult, history, conspiracy, and violence.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Fellowcraft episode for August 2020. I haven't really talked a lot about this to anybody, but I'm going to talk to you about it for a second. I'm COVID-19 positive, and I feel fine. I feel great. Everything's going to be okay. I have a feeling in a week or two I'm going to be just fine. I got sick for one day. I had a fever and I laid down and I got up. I had a few drinks. I recorded. I can't remember what episode I recorded. I recorded an episode. I came upstairs. I was like, I feel fine. I watched a little bit of TV and I went to bed. I woke up the next day and I felt fine. However, I had made an appointment when I was feeling shitty. I made an appointment to do drive-by testing. So I was like, well, you know, the responsible thing would be to still adhere to the test and just make sure everything was okay. You know, I'm pretty sure I just had like a summer cold. But in the back of my mind, I'm like, I don't get summer colds. Nothing makes sense. And so I did the test and I got up this morning, jumped in the shower. And I was like, oh, I should probably check to see if that test is back. And I opened up the app that they made me download or whatever. And there it was, big red positive mark. So I had a laugh about it. And I called my dad and I disinfected my house and talked to my wife to see if she wanted me to move into the studio for a week or two. So everything's fine. The old Uncle John's going to be just fine. We're going to start a new series here for the Fellowcraft episode. We're kind of done with Atlantis, at least for the time being. And we're going to be talking about this cat named Count de Saint-Germain. A lot of people have done episodes about Count Saint-Germain. And I went and I found the most holy Trinosophia by Count de Saint-Germain. 1933 this was published. So this is to you here. Raise your glass if you're following along. This is to all the Patreon supporters and Subscribe Star supporters. That's you guys. Thank you. This episode is for you. So I thought this would be fitting for this month. We're doing a perk this month for $5 and $10 supporters of the show. You guys are going to be getting an additional tarot card. So in Crowley's deck, the Thoth deck, he has 3 magician cards. They're all number 1. They're all magicians, but they're all different. So for my deck that I did, the minor and the major arcana, there's 1 magician. But for this perk, we're going to get a second magician card, but it's not a magician, it's a wizard. So I'm going to post a picture of it and the back of the cards on my Instagram. So if you guys have, I know a few of you guys, $10 supporters, already bit the bullet and bought the tarot card deck. So you guys are going to have a secondary magician card to fold in there if you want to be to have more, or you can change the wizard, take the magician out and put the wizard in. I don't know. So hey, news flash, in a few months you're going to have a 3rd wizard card coming your way, so you can have all 3 wizard card or all 3 magician cards. So if you haven't seen the wizard card, check out the Instagram. I'm going to put some cool pictures of it and the back of the tarot cards up there. And if not, it's just a cool fucking card to have. It's just a cool card to have. Anyhow, I am literally preaching to the choir right now. So let's get into this thing. Oh, the reason I said it was important is because the wizard, the character on the wizard card, is my character Cyrus the Dead Guy. And he's the reason that I know who Count Saint-Germain is. Because as we're going to find out, Count Saint-Germain is this guy who pops up periodically throughout Western history over an extended amount of time. And he seems to be like some sort of immortal or something. And this is a trait that my character, Cyrus the Dead Guy, has. Instead of immortal or something, he would be like ever living. Like he's basically a skeleton walking around. But like Count Saint-Germain, he's an accessorizer. He's pretty much always dressed real nice. He could be genteel if he wants, if you catch him in the right mood. He's a character that shows up in some of my books, and he's the main character of the Ages graphic novel. What? Yeah, I have a skull that sits on my desk, and it's like the show Observer, and it's named Cyrus. And Cyrus is like, "Hey, why'd you call your dad when you found out you're sick? What's wrong? What's wrong with you?" The answer is because my dad and I have been sparring about the usefulness of masks. I've mentioned my old man from time to time, and that he's a Maoist utopianist. He's a 100% dyed-in-the-wool commie. So when I found out, verified that I had the virus or whatever, I called him, and the first thing I said was, "Well, I wore the fucking mask like they told me to. I've been locked down like they told me to. I've been scrubbing my hands like they told me to. And I fucking still got it." So yeah, I called to rub it in a little bit. All right. Okay, without further ado, let's go. Count Saint-Germain, the most holy Trinosophia. The grace and dignity that characterized his conduct, together with the perfect composure in every situation, attested to the innate refinement in the culture of one accustomed to high station. A London publication makes the following brief analysis of his ancestry. Did he, in his old age, tell the truth to his proctor and enthusiastic admirer, Prince Charles of Hesse-Kassel? According to the story told by his last friend, he was the son of Prince Rákóczi of Transylvania and his first wife, Etekle, who was placed when an infant under the protection of the last of the Medici. When he grew up and he heard that his 2 brothers, sons of the Princess Hesse Rheinfelds of Rothenburg, had received the names of Saint Charles and Saint Elizabeth, he determined to take the name of their holy brother, Saint Germanus. what was the truth. One thing alone is certain, that he was the protege of the last Medici. Cesare Cantu, librarian at Milan, also substantiates the Ragosi hypothesis, adding that Saint-Germain was educated in the university at Siena. In her excellent monograph, The Count de Saint-Germain, The Secret of Kings, Miss Cooper Oakley lists the most important names under which this amazing person masqueraded between the years 1710 and 1822. During this time, she writes, we have M. de Saint-Germain as the Marquis de Montfort, Count Bellamarie, or Aymar at Venice, Chevalier Schoenberg at Pisa, Chevalier Weldon at Milan and Leipzig, Count Stolikoff in Genoa and Leghorn. That's the birthplace of the famous mid-20th century rooster Froghorn Leghorn. Now listen up, boy, I'm trying to tell you something. Graf Torzorgay at Schwallenbach in Triesendorf, Prince Ragosay at Dresden, and Count de Saint-Germain at Paris, The Hague, London, and St. Petersburg. To this list, it may be added that there has been a tendency among mystical writers to connect with him the mysterious Count de Gebeleus, who appeared at the Abbey of Villiers and delivered several discourses on submundane spirits, or it is possible that he is the same as the remarkable Signor Gualdi, whose exploits Hargrave Jennings recounts in the book The Rosicrucians, Their Rites and Mysteries. He is also suspected of being identical with Count Hompsch, the last Grand Master of the Knights of Malta. In personal appearance, Count Saint-Germain has been described as a medium height, well-proportioned in body, and of regular and pleasing features. His complexion is somewhat swarthy, and his dark hair, though often powdered. He dressed simply, usually in black, but his clothes were well-fitting and of the best quality. His eyes possessed a great fascination, and those who looked into them were profoundly influenced. According to Madame de Pompadour, he claimed to possess the secret of eternal youth, and upon a certain occasion claimed having been personally acquainted with Cleopatra, and at another time of having chatted familiarly with the Queen of Sheba. Had it not been for his striking personality and apparently supernatural powers, the Count would be undoubtedly have been considered insane. But his transcending genius was so evident that he was merely termed eccentric. From Souvenirs de Marie Antoinette by Madame la Countess de Admahar, we have an excellent description of the Count, whom Frederick the Great referred to as the man who does not die. And it was in 1743 the rumor spread through that a foreigner, enormously rich judging by the magnificence of his jewelry, had just arrived at Versailles. Where he came from, no one has ever been able to find out. The figure was well knit and graceful, and his hands delicate, and his feet very small, and shapely legs enhanced by well-fitting silk stockings. His nether garments, which fit very closely, suggested a rare perfection of form. His smile showed magnificent teeth. A pretty dimple marked his chin, and his hair was black and at a glance, soft and penetrating, and oh, what eyes! Never have I seen their like. And he looked about 40 or 45 years old, and he was often to be met within the royal private apartments where he had unrestricted admission at the beginning of 1768. The Count de Saint-Germain was recognized as an outstanding scholar and a cunning linguist of the day. Linguistic proficiency verged on the supernatural. He spoke German, English, Italian, Portuguese, Spanish, French, with a Piedmontese accent, Greek, Latin, Sanskrit, Arabic, and Chinese with such fluency that in every land in which he visited, he was accepted as a native learned, writes one author, speaking very civilized language admirably. A great musician with an excellent chemist. He played the part of a prodigy, fire starter, and he played it to perfection. Even his most relentless detractors admitted that the Count was possessed of almost incredible attainments in every department of learning. Madame de Pompadour extols the genius of Saint-Germain in the following words: through knowledge of all language, ancient and modern, a prodigious memory, erudition of which glimpses could be caught between the caprices of the conversation, which was always amusing and occasionally very engaging, and inexhaustible skill in varying the tones and subjects of the converse, and being always fresh and infusing with unexpected into the most trivial discourses, made him a superb talker. Sometimes he recounted anecdotes of the court and of the Valois, or the princes still more remote, with such precise accuracy in every detail as almost to create the illusion that he had been an eyewitness to what he narrated. He had traveled the whole world over, and the king lent a willing ear to the narratives of his voyages over Asia and Africa, and to his tales about the courts of Russia, Turkey, and Austria. He appeared to be more intimately acquainted with the secrets of each court than the charge d'affaires of the king. The Count was ambidextrous to such a degree that he could write the same article with both hands simultaneously. When the two pieces of paper were afterwards placed one upon the other with light behind them, the writing on one sheet exactly covered the writing on the other. He could repeat pages of print after one reading. To prove the two lobes of his brain could work independently, he wrote a love letter with his right hand and a set of mystical verses with his left, both at the same time. He also sang beautifully. By something akin to telepathy, this remarkable person was able to feel when the presence was needed in some distant city or state. And it has even been recorded of him that he had the disconcerting habit of appearing in his own apartment and those of his friends without resorting to the conventionality of the door. He was, by some curious circumstance, a patron of railroads and steamboats. Franz Graffier, in his Recollections of Vienna, recounts the following incident in the life of the astonishing Count. Saint-Germain then gradually passed into a solemn mood. For a few seconds he became rigid as a statue. His eyes, which were always expressive beyond words, became dull and colorless. Presently, however, his whole being became reanimated. He made a movement with his hands as if in a signal of departure. And he said, "I am leaving. Ich schiede. Do not visit me once again. You will see me tomorrow night. I am off. I have much needed in Constantinople and then in England." And there to prepare two inventions which we'll have in the next century: trains and steamboats. As an historian, the Count possessed an uncanny knowledge of every occurrence of the preceding 2,000 years. And in his reminiscence, he described in intimate detail events of the previous centuries in which he had played an important role. He spoke of scenes at the court of Francis I as if he had seen them, describing exactly the appearance of the king, imitating his voice, manner, and language, affecting throughout the character of his eyewitness. His style, he edified his audience with pleasant stories of Louis XIV, and regaled them with vivid descriptions of places and persons. Most of Saint-Germain's biographers have noted his particular habits with regard to eating. It was diet, he declared, combined with this marvelous elixir which constituted the true secret of longevity. And although invited to the most sumptuous repast, he resolutely refused to eat any food but such as had been especially prepared for him and according to his recipe. His food consisted mostly of oatmeal, groats, and I don't know what a groat is. It's like a groat. And the white meat of chicken. And he is known on a rare occasion to have taken a little bit of wine. And he always took the most elaborate precautions against the possibility of contracting cold. Frequently invited to dinner, he devoted the same time during which he naturally would have eaten to regaling the other guests with tales of magic and sorcery, unbelievable adventures in remote places, intimate episodes from the lives of the great.
Are you interested in the occult, history, conspiracy, and violence? Learn more at Advertise.com. Find more episodes on this topic. Sign up for the mailing list for bonus content. Get access to the show archive. And visit the storefront for tarot cards, merch, and books. Learn more at Advertise.com.
Here we go, I love this part. In one of his tales concerning vampires, Saint-Germain mentioned in an offhanded way that he possessed the wand or the staff with which Moses brought water from the rock, adding that it had been presented to him at Babylon during the reign of Cyrus the Great. The memoir writers admit themselves at a loss to how many of the Count's statements could be believed. Common sense, as then defined, assured them that most of the accounts must be fashioned out of whole cloth. On the other hand, his information was of such precise nature that his learning was so transcendent in every respect that his words carried the weight of conviction. Once, while relating an anecdote regarding his own experience at some remote time, and suddenly failing to recollect clearly what he considered a relevant detail, he turned to his valet and said, "Am I not mistaken, Roger?" The man instantly replied, "Monsieur le Count forgets that I have only been with him for 500 years and could not therefore have been present at that occasion. It must have been my predecessor." The smallest doings of so unusual a person as Saint-Germain would, of course, be meticulously noted. Several interesting and amusing bits of information are available relative to the establishment which he maintained in Paris. He had two valets de chambre, The first, Roger, already mentioned. The second, a Parisian engaged for his knowledge of the city and other useful local information. Besides this, his household consisted of 4 lackeys in snuff-colored livery and gold braiding. He hired a carriage at 500 francs a month, and he often changed his coats and waistcoats. He had a rich and expansive collection of them, but nothing approached the magnificence of his buttons, studs, watches, rings, chains, diamonds, and other precious stones. Of these he possessed a very large value and varied them every week. Meeting Saint-Germain one day at dinner, Baron Glichin chanced to focus the conversation upon Italy and had a good fortune to please Saint-Germain, who, turning to him, remarked, "I have taken a great fancy to you, and will show you a dozen pictures, the like of which you have not seen in Italy." In the words of Glichin, actually, I almost kept his word, for the pictures he showed me were all stamped either with a singularity or perfection, which rendered them more interesting than many first-class works. Above all was the Holy Family by Murillo, equal in beauty to that of Raphael at Versailles. But he showed me other wonders, a large quantity of jewels and colored diamonds of extraordinary size and perfection. I thought I beheld the treasures of the wonderful lamp among other gems, were an opal of monstrous size and a white sapphire as large as an egg, which by its brilliancy dimmed all the stones compared with it. I flatter myself that I am not a connoisseur in gems, but I can declare that it was impossible to perceive any reason for doubting the genuineness of these jewels, the more so that they are not mounted. As an art critic, Saint-Germain could instantly detect the most cleverly perpetrated forgery. He did considerable painting himself, achieving an incredible brilliance of color, and he was so successful that Vanloo, the French artist, begged him to divulge the secrets of his pigments, but he refused. He is accredited with having secured astonishing results in the painting of jewelry by mixing powdered mother of pearl with his colors. What occurred to his priceless collection of paintings and jewels after his death or disappearance is unknown. It is possible that the Count's chemical knowledge comprehended the manufacture of luminous paints such as is now used on watch dials. His skills as a chemist was so profound that he could remove flaws from diamonds and emeralds. What is this sorcery? Which feat is actually performed at the request of Louis XV in 1757. Stones of comparatively little value were thus transformed into gems of the first water after remaining for a short time in his possession. He frequently performed this last experiment. If the statements of his friends can be relied upon, there is also a popular story to the effect that he placed gems worth $1,000 on the place cards at the banquets that he gave. It was the court. It was at the court of Versailles when the Count de Saint-Germain was brought face to face with an elderly Count de Gergy. Upon beholding the celebrated magician, the aged lady stepped backwards in amazement. The following well-authenticated conversation took place between the two. Okay, so Countess de Gergy, 50 years ago, the Countess said, I was ambassadress at Venice, and I remember seeing you there, looking just as you do now, only somewhat riper in age, perhaps, for you have grown younger since then. Bowing low, the Count answered with dignity, I've always thought myself happy in being able to make myself agreeable to the ladies. Madame de Gergy then continued, You then called yourself Marquis Belletti. And the Count bowed again and replied, and Countess Gergie's memory is still good as it was 50 years ago. The Countess smiled, that I owe to an elixir you gave me at our first meeting. You really are an extraordinary man, and Saint-Germain assumed a grave expression. Did this Marquis Belletti have a bad reputation? He asked. On the contrary, replied the Countess, he was very good society. The Count shrugged his shoulders expressively, saying, well, as no one complains of him, I adopt him willingly as my grandfather. The Countess de Edmahar was present during the entire conversation and vouches for its accuracy in every detail. Madame du hast mich, femme de chamber to Madame de Prompteur, writes at some length of the astonishing man who often called upon her mistress. She records a conversation which took place between La Pompadour and Saint-Germain. It is true, madam, that I knew Madame de Gergis long ago, the Count affirmed quietly. But according to that, replied the Marquis, you must now be more than 100 years old. That is not impossible, enigmatically returned the Count with a slight smile, but I admit that it is more possible that this lady, for whom I have infinite respect for, talks nonsense. It was answers such as this that led Gustave Borde to write of Saint-Germain, that he allows a certain mystery to hover about a mystery to hover about him, a mystery which awakens curiosity and sympathy. Being a virtuoso in the art of misleading, he says nothing that is untrue. He has a rare gift of remaining silent and profiting by it. But to return to Madame du Hast's story, you gave Madame de Gergis Prest la de Pompadour an elixir. Surprising in its effects, she pretends that for a long while she appeared to be no older than 24. Why should you not give some to the king? Saint-Germain allowed expression, feigning terror, to spread over his face. Ah, madame! I should be mad indeed to take it to my head to give the king an unknown drug. The Count was on very friendly terms with Louis XV, with whom he had long discussions on the subject of precious stones, their manufacture and purification. Louis was amused and thrilled by turns. Never before had so extraordinary a person trod the sacred precincts of Versailles. The whole court was topsy-turvy with miracles were the order of the day. Courtiers of depleted fortunes envisioned the magic multiplication of their gold, and their grand dames of uncertain age had dreams of youth and favor restored by the mystery man's fabled elixirs. It's easy to understand how so fascinating a character could relieve the boredom of a king who had spent a life a martyr to royal fashions, as was deprived by his position of the pleasure of honest work. Then again, rulers become victims to the fads of the moment, and Louis himself was dabbling in alchemy and other occult arts. True, the king was only a dilettante, whose will was not strong enough to bind him to any lasting purpose, but Germain appealed to several qualities in the royal nature: the Count's fund of knowledge, the skill with which he assembled his facts to the amusement and edification of his audience, the mystery which surrounds his appearance and disappearance, his consummate skill both as a critic and a technician in the arts and sciences, to say nothing of his jewels and his wealth, endeared him to the king. Had Louis but profited by the wisdom and prophetic warnings of the mysterious Count, the reign of terror might have been averted. Saint-Germain was ever the patron and never the patronized. Louis had found the diplomat in whom there was no guile. De Pompadour writes, he enriched the cabinet of the king by his pictures of Velasquez and of Murillo, and he presented to the Marquis the most precious and priceless gems, for this singular man passed for being fabulously rich. He distributed diamonds and jewels with astonishing liberality. Not the least admirable evidence of the Count's genius was his penetrating grasp of the political situation of Europe, and in the consummate skill in which he was parried and thrusts of his diplomatic adversaries. At all times he bore credentials which gave him the entry to most exclusive circles of European nobility. During the reign of Peter the Great, Saint-Germain was in Russia, and between the years 1737 and 1742, he was in the court of the Shah of Persia. As an honored guest on the subject of his wanderings, Una Birch writes, the travels of the Count de Saint-Germain covered a long period of years in a great range of countries, from Persia to France and from Calcutta to Rome. He was known and respected. Horace Walpole spoke with him in London in 1745. Clive knew him in India in 1756. Madame de Admehar alleges that she met him in Paris in 1789, 5 years after his supposed death. Ooh, dun, dun, dun. While other persons pretend to have held conversations with him in the early 19th century, he was on familiar and intimate terms with the crowned heads of Europe and the honored friend of many distinguished persons of all nationalities. He's even mentioned in the memoirs and the letters of the day, and always as a man of mystery. Frederick the Great, Voltaire, Madame de Pompadour, Rousseau, Chatham, and Walpole all knew him personally, rivaled each other in curiosity as to his origin, and during many decades in which he was before the world. However, no one succeeded in discovering why he appeared as a Jacobite agent in London, as a conspirator in Petersburg, and an alchemist and a connoisseur of pictures in Paris, or as a Russian general at Naples. Now and again, the curtain which shrouds his action is drawn aside, and we are permitted to see him fiddling in the music room at Versailles, gossiping with Horace Walpole in London, sitting in Frederick the Great's library at Berlin, or conducting illuminist meetings in caverns by the Rhine. In the realm of music, Saint-Germain was equally a master. While at Versailles, he gave concerts on the violin, and on at least one occasion during an eventful life, he conducted a symphony orchestra without a score. In Paris, Saint-Germain was a diplomat and an alchemist. In London, he was a musician. He left a musical record behind him to remind English people to the sojourn in this country. Many of his compositions were published by Walsh and Catherine Street Strand, and his earliest English song, "Oh, Wouldst Thou Know What Sacred Charms," came out while he was still on his first visit to London. But on quitting the city, he entrusted certain other settings of words of Walsh, such as Jove, when he saw, in the arias out of his little opera, Li Inconstanza Delusa, both of which compositions were published during his absence from England. When he returned in 1760, he gave the world a great many new songs, followed in 1780 by a set of solos for the violin. He was industrious and capable artist, and he attracted a great deal of fashionable attention to himself, both as a composer and an executant. I'm John. This is the Advertise Fellowcraft episode, the Count Saint-Germain Part 1. And here's some of the Count's tunes. See you next month. I hope all is well.
Thank you for listening, and we hope that you enjoyed the show. Please send an email or find us on social media and let us know what you think about the show. We would appreciate it if you would give us a 5-star rate and review wherever you find your favorite podcasts. You can find Stigmata Studios, graphic, novels, and comic books at apricast.com.